Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here in the sports entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada, on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly, and this is a part series that we have been doing here on Vegas Hockey Hub. First week, I looked back at the 2017 NHL expansion draft, broke down what happened in the first expansion draft that the Vegas Golden Knights did. In week two, we went over one of the most important off seasons that the Vegas Golden Knights were ever a part of, and why that off season changed the Vegas Golden Knights forever. So to continue on that series, our third part of this series, we have to look back at the 2017 NHL draft, because this draft affected the Vegas Golden Knights so impactfully in some ways that are obvious, one way that isn't obvious, and then one way Vegas could have been a dynasty in the making if they hadn't made this trade. So let me go over the four parts of looking back at the 2017 NHL draft, because no, I'm not going to go over all 10 people that were drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2017 NHL draft. Honestly, that would take too long. It would take forever. It would take longer than a half-hour show. Instead, I will just address the four players who really made an impact in Vegas. That is first round pick Cody Glass, first round pick Nick Suzuki, first round pick Erik Brannstrom, and second round pick Nicholas Hague. Those four players, like I said, made an impact on Vegas in one way or another. So when you address it and you really break it down, here is how we're going to start it out. We're going to go by going to Cody Glass first. Now, Cody Glass was drafted the highest out of everybody that was taken by Vegas. There was a big reason as to why Cody Glass was considered a very good player heading into the 2017 NHL draft. 3 years prior, he was playing in the WHL for the Portland Winterhawks. And in those 3 seasons prior, he had a 94-point season in 2016-2017. And then he had a 102-point season, 37 of them being goals in 64 games in the WHL in the 2017-2018 season. But one concern that Cody Glass had, and one concern that really affected Cody Glass to this day, was could he stay healthy? Could Cody Glass be a healthy player and be someone that could play all 82 games in the NHL? He played 5 years in Portland from 2014 until 2019, not because of his talent, but it was because of how injury prone he was. In 2018-2019, he played 38 games in the WHL before coming down with an injury. When he was playing in the AHL for the Chicago Wolves, who was the AHL affiliate for the Vegas Golden Knights, Cody Glass only played 6 games in 2018 before having some form of an injury and then coming back towards the back end. 2019-2020, he only played 2 games in the AHL and then played a little bit of a small short cup of coffee with the Vegas Golden Knights that season. In 2020-2021 in the AHL, he played only 14 games that season. So Cody Glass, throughout his entire career, didn't matter if it was in juniors or if it was in the minors, Cody Glass's biggest flaw and really his biggest weakness was being healthy and being able to play a full 82-game season, playing a full 70-game season in the AHL. Because honestly, he never did it in the AHL. He never played a full 82 games in the NHL. As a matter of fact, Cody Glass's stats with the Vegas Golden Knights was really underwhelming. For a first-round pick, for their top pick in franchise history, you'll see right here, him having 9 goals 13 assists and 22 points with a -1 and 14 penalty minutes. It was really unfortunate because he never got a chance to play long-term minutes. His first season playing for the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2019-2020 season, he only played less than 40 games. So he played half of the season. And then year two on the bottom six in 2020-2021, his second and final season playing in Vegas, he only played 27 games that year. So once again, he played less than half of the season. That really felt like that was always the problem with Cody Glass in Las Vegas, is that he really never garnered any momentum. There was really never a chance for Cody Glass to build up the games and the repetition and the reps that you need as a young player. So unfortunately, Cody Glass, after 2 seasons in the NHL, 3 seasons in the AHL for Vegas, they end up flipping Cody Glass and they end up flipping him to the Nashville Predators. Now, this was a deal that brought back second overall pick Nolan Patrick in that same trade. That's how the Vegas Golden Knights acquired Nolan Patrick, by trading Cody Glass. And as much as I would love to say that he's had a redemption arc since going to Nashville, unfortunately, Cody Glass hasn't had that redemption story. He's only played 15 games in 2 seasons for Nashville and has only had 3 points during that time period. However, his AHL stats, he's had 62 points in a full 66 games for Milwaukee. So maybe Cody Glass can redeem himself as an AHL player, but it's really unfortunate what happened to Cody Glass, because he went from being a touted prospect, had over a 100-point season in the WHL for Portland, from getting injured in Portland, and then eventually not being able to secure a full-time roster spot in Vegas, and now being a fourth liner in Nashville. So he was the first one I said that had an unfortunate story, and that was Cody Glass, because he really had the talent, and you could see the talent when he was in Portland, and you can understand why he was a 6th overall pick. He just unfortunately never developed into that top line forward that Vegas was hoping he would be when they drafted him 6th overall. So he was the unfortunate one. The second one is a story of a prospect who got away. He is the story of what if the Vegas Golden Knights had kept Nick Suzuki. What if the Vegas Golden Knights had found a way to keep 13th overall pick Nick Suzuki from the Owen Sound attack of the OHL? Because here's the worst part about the Nick Suzuki trade. It wasn't that he wasn't just drafted by Vegas. Not only was he scouted by them, he was developed by them. He played for the Chicago Wolves, for example, in the AHL. He actually spent some time being with the main roster during the 2017-2018 season. In the playoffs, he actually got to join the Vegas Golden Knights and be part of the 30-man roster during that 2018 Stanley Cup run. But when it came to Nick Suzuki, the worst part about it was that you knew he had talent. You knew that Nick Suzuki was going to be a good talent in the NHL someday. Just look at his stat from the 2017-2018 season when the Vegas Golden Knights drafted him. Playing for the Owen Sound of the OHL, Nick Suzuki had 42 goals, 58 assists, 100 points, and a plus 30 in the OHL. Nick Suzuki had the talent, and most people could see it. You know, you had scouts, you had people who were watching Nick Suzuki at that point, and you could see the talent was there for Nick Suzuki. But what ended up happening is that he ended up not playing for Vegas like you see right there. Instead, Nick Suzuki gets traded to Montreal for Max Pacioretty. The Vegas Golden Knights in 2018 trade Tomas Tatar, Nick Suzuki, and a few draft picks to get the captain of the Montreal Canadiens in Max Pacioretty. And now I'm not going to say this was the cherry on top, but Nick Suzuki, if you look on that jersey right there, he has a C patch on his jersey. Nick Suzuki went on to not only be one of the best players the Montreal Canadiens have right now, Nick Suzuki ended up becoming the captain of the Montreal Canadiens after the Vegas Golden Knights traded him. And his stats playing for Montreal should be all you need to know about how talented Nick Suzuki was with the Montreal Canadiens. He has had 52 goals, almost 100 assists for a whopping 150 points, one All-Star appearance in 217 games for the Montreal Canadiens. When it comes to Nick Suzuki, he has finally showcased that talent he showed in the OHL. He was able to show everyone the talent on why he was a first round pick in the NHL. So the first one was the unfortunate, and that was Cody Glass. Unfortunately, he never developed. But the second one is a what if. What if Nick Suzuki had stayed with the Vegas Golden Knights? What if Nick Suzuki was wearing that number 17 playing on the top line in Vegas today? What if Max Pacioretty had been dealt Erik Brannstrom, who was their top prospect at that point, instead of Nick Suzuki? Because Nick Suzuki was the number 2 prospect in the Vegas Golden Knights system. Go back to the 2018 articles. They actually will verify this. Nick Suzuki was the number 2 prospect in Vegas. And when Vegas was doing the deal for Max Pacioretty, let me take you back in time. When Max Pacioretty was in the deal was being constructed, reports had come out that the Vegas Golden Knights and the Montreal Canadiens, Montreal originally wanted the top prospect in that deal. Vegas was not willing to trade their top prospect in that season, so they gave up their number 2 prospect in the deal instead. So it's a crazy what if, but I've just always wondered what would have happened if the Vegas Golden Knights had given up their top prospect in that deal. What if they had traded Erik Brannstrom, who we're going to talk about in a second, instead of Nick Suzuki, and how much different the NHL would have been if by year 6, the Vegas Golden Knights, who are currently 5 games above 500, have Nick Suzuki on their top line alongside Mark Stone and alongside Jack Eichel. So that was the what if. The next player on here is the caveat. Or should I say Erik Brannstrom is actually the best part of the 2017 NHL draft, but it's not about Erik Brannstrom himself. Erik Brannstrom is actually a reason why Vegas has been so successful moving forward. It just didn't have to involve him. Now, Erik Brannstrom was drafted 15th overall, and he was taken from the SHL, the Swedish Hockey League, and he was a very young defenseman, but he also was a very tiny defenseman. A lot of people complained about Erik Brannstrom being 5'10" and being 185 pounds. I remember that was the one weakness that some people had regarding to Erik Brannstrom. I thought it was interesting how Erik Brannstrom's size was the one negative that a lot of people had as his weakness heading into the NHL. Well, Erik Brannstrom gets selected by Vegas, and he does play some games in the preseason for Vegas. There's the jersey right there. Erik Brannstrom was playing in the preseason for Vegas. He even gets to be in the AHL with the Vegas Golden Knights. He actually played in Chicago in 2018-2019. And as a matter of fact, Erik Brannstrom, in his statistics in the AHL in that 2018-2019 season, he had 7 goals, 25 assists for 32 points in 28 plus penalty minutes. Now, the other negative that Erik Brannstrom had is that because of his size, people wondered if he was going to be able to transition as fluently to the NHL as some other defensemen in his draft class, like Miro Heiskanen, like Cale Makar. There was some defensemen in that 2017 NHL draft that people believed were going to transition a lot better than Erik Brannstrom would. And his -1 in the AHL would kind of be a precursor to what you'll see in a minute. But what Erik Brannstrom did for Vegas is not play for Vegas at all. What Erik Brannstrom did was be a bargaining chip as the top prospect for the Vegas Golden Knights. Erik Brannstrom being the #1 prospect would benefit Vegas at the 2019 NHL trade deadline because they would flip Erik Brannstrom, Oscar Lindberg, and multiple draft picks in the Mark Stone deal. And Erik Brannstrom going to Ottawa was a big deal because Erik Brannstrom, he played in the AHL for the Belleville Senators. He's currently on the bottom 6 in Ottawa today. In fact, his stats right there, 2 goals, 31 assists with a -26 in 123 games for the Ottawa Senators. But it's not about Erik Brannstrom himself. That is the reason why this was the best part of the 2017 NHL draft. Erik Brannstrom being traded for Mark Stone is what ended up being the best part of the 2017 NHL draft. If you do not have Erik Brannstrom, you cannot acquire Mark Stone. Without Erik Brannstrom, you do not get the captain of the Vegas Golden Knights in Mark Stone. Without Erik Brannstrom, you do not get one of the best defensive forwards in all of hockey in Mark Stone. And without Erik Brannstrom, you do not get the opportunity to go out and get a leader in the locker room and someone that gets a lot of respect here in Las Vegas, and that was Mark Stone. So the first person was Cody Glass, who was the unfortunate part of the 2017 NHL draft. You had the what if with Nick Suzuki, and then you had the best part of the 2017 NHL draft, and that was Erik Brannstrom, because he ended up being dealt for Mark Stone, who ended up becoming the captain and the leader of the Vegas Golden Knights in the long-term future. Now, the last part that we have to talk about is this man right here, and that is defenseman Nicolas Hague, who was drafted from the OHL. He was a second-round pick by the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Nicolas Hague is an interesting story because he was originally from the OHL, but he scored a lot of goals as a defenseman. Nicolas Hague, as a defenseman, is a very interesting situation because in his 3 seasons in the OHL, he scored 14 goals in 2015, he scored 18 goals in 2016, and scored a whopping 35 goals in 2017. Nicolas Hague was not your traditional defenseman as most people were. Nicolas Hague was a defenseman that ended up being a offensive-minded defenseman. And his 3 seasons playing for Chicago, playing for the Chicago Wolves, actually ended up being a blessing in disguise. Because Nicolas Hague, in his 3 seasons in the AHL, he ended up having 13 goals in his second season with the Chicago Wolves, and he ended up having 43 points as a Chicago Wolf, and he actually played 25 AHL playoff games for the Chicago Wolves during his tenure. And if I actually should make an argument to you, him playing in the AHL for 3 seasons is actually what benefited the Vegas Golden Knights. Nicolas Hague being able to transition and develop in the minors for a long time helped him become the bottom 6 forward he is in Vegas today. Nicolas Hague developing as a defenseman is a reason why his stats right there have become a reality. Nicolas Hague, in his last 4 seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights, 10 goals, 33 assists, 43 points with a +22 and over 100 penalty minutes. A lot of people forget that physicality still exists in hockey, and Nick Hague is an example of it. Nick Hague is not afraid to drop the gloves. He is perfectly fine with going up and attacking people and going up and defending his players with the Vegas Golden Knights. So what Vegas Golden Knights got with this fourth and final person from that 2017 NHL draft, what they acquired was dependability. What they got was the best player on the current Vegas Golden Knights roster from that 2017 NHL draft. Nicholas Hague, out of the four players in the first instant, he ended up being the best part of that deal. Now, I want to mention to everyone who's watching right now that the 2017 NHL draft, when you actually stop and analyze it and look back at it, it was a big deal. It was a huge deal at the time because they also went out and got some more talent in the later round. Not only did they get Jake Leshkonen, who, by the way, has developed into a bottom six player for the Vegas Golden Knights, he has actually been playing a good amount of minutes for the Vegas Golden Knights. Has had over 40 games played in his career in the NHL so far. They also got Giannis Rondenberg, who has been playing in the AHL and playing in the NHL for the Vegas Golden Knights. They also went out and got Jari Patara later in the draft, who has been a welcoming and a young prospect in the AHL as a goaltender for the Vegas Golden Knights. Lucas Elvenez, he spent some minutes in the AHL for Vegas. Jack Dugan, he actually spent time in the AHL before going to New Jersey this offseason. And they also ended up getting Ben Jones, who spent a couple of years in the AHL for the Vegas Golden Knights. So for a 2017 NHL draft, their later rounds got talent when it came to their AHL system because they had 4 or 5 players who they drafted between round 2 and round 7 who eventually played plenty of seasons in the AHL and spending time in Henderson and Chicago for the Vegas Golden Knights. One last note I want to mention about the 2017 NHL draft was who was the player taken after Cody Glass? Who was the player taken after Nick Suzuki? Who was the player taken after Erik Brannstrom? Because I know some people want to talk about it, but it's important to know who was drafted around those players. So Cody Glass, taken right after him, was Lias Andersson, who was taken 7th overall, and he was with the New York Rangers. He spent a few seasons there, got flipped to the Los Angeles Kings, and he is now playing in the AHL in the 2022-2023 season. Lias Andersson unfortunately never developed into the top line forward that the New York Rangers expected him to be when they acquired him. So the Vegas Golden Knights dodged a bullet there by getting Cody Glass over Lias Andersson. Cal Foote was taken right after Nick Suzuki. He was drafted by Tampa Bay 14th overall in the 2017 NHL draft. Now, Cal Foote has been an interesting story because he has played the last 3 seasons for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he has actually appeared in the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Colorado Avalanche in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2022. So Cal Foote has actually been a solid bottom line defenseman for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And with him being only 22 years old, Cal Foote has actually been a really good defenseman, a good American defenseman for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So at 14, Cal Foote would have been a solid pick if Nick Suzuki hadn't have been better. And then 16th overall, Juuso Valimaki, who was taken by the Calgary Flames 16th overall. He played 4 seasons in Calgary and then got flipped to the Arizona Coyotes this offseason. So the 2022 offseason, he goes to Arizona and is unfortunately suffering in Arizona as a very good defenseman for them in the 2022-2023 season. And then, just to talk about Nicholas Hague for a second, the player drafted right after Nicholas Hague has been Isaac Ratcliffe, who is a winger for the Philadelphia Flyers. He is playing in the AHL right now. He actually put up 28 points in the last season for Lehigh Valley. So the Vegas Golden Knights really kind of dodged some bullets when it came to the talent that was drafted around them because there really wasn't anybody taken right after Nick Suzuki, taken right after Cody Glass, taken right after Eric Brandstrom, taken right after Nicholas Hague that ended up becoming superstars. But when you go a few picks down, that actually changes a whole lot. 11th overall, the LA Kings took Gabe Vilardi, who has blossomed into a really good forward for the LA Kings. This is a Gabe Vilardi who has already had 6 goals in a young 2022 season and is currently averaging a point per game for the LA Kings in the 2022-2023 season. He is actually going to be part of the future for the LA Kings long term. Martin Necas, who is taken 12th overall by Carolina. He just had back-to-back 40-point seasons in Carolina. He has blossomed into a really solid forward in the NHL. He was taken 12th overall by Carolina. You also had Josh Norris, who was taken 19th overall by San Jose. When he was flipped to Ottawa in the Erik Karlsson deal, he had a 55-point season in 2021 for the Ottawa Senators. He is now getting paid $8 million by the Ottawa Senators. So he's making a very nice payday out there in Ottawa. Robert Thomas, who was taken 20th overall by St. Louis, he has actually developed and has become a solid member of the St. Louis Blues. He averaged a point per game last season, having 77 points in 72 games in 2021. And he was part of the St. Louis team that won the Stanley Cup in 2019. So when you dig a little bit deeper into the 2017 NHL draft, you can actually see all of the talent that was selected after them, just like goaltender Jake Ottinger, who was taken 26 overall by the Dallas Stars. He, just by the way, had a goals against average of 1.8 in the playoffs this past playoff for the Dallas Stars. So when you've had Jake Ottinger, when you've had all these players who were taken later in the first round, yeah, you could do coulda, shoulda, woulda, but you have to sit back and realize that those players were taken later in the first round, and those teams are a lot better than teams that are in the top half. So it would be a little bit of a stretch to say that Jake Ottinger, who was the best goalie out of that draft class, he would have been taken by Vegas. Well, how many years it would have taken for him to develop behind Marc-Andre Fleury? All right, you take Robert Thomas, you take Josh Norris, but they were playing for teams that were in win now mode. Whereas Vegas, most of these prospects were going to be taking years to develop in Vegas. They were not going to be called up right away. So when it comes to the NHL, you can always play the what if game, but outside of maybe Cal Foote and maybe Gabe Vilardi, you really can't sit there and say, you know what, Vegas needed to pass up on the 2 players they selected, and they needed to draft these guys. Because Josh Norris, Robert Thomas, Jake Ottinger, they would have been nice selections, but they really wouldn't have been able to help the team long term because those teams were in win now mode. Jason Robertson's the same way. Jason Robertson was taken in the second round by Dallas, but Dallas was in the Stanley Cup Finals not even 2 years later, and he actually took a few years to get into the NHL. It wasn't like he just popped up right away. So as we're talking and we're looking back at the 2017 NHL draft, looking back at what the Vegas Golden Knights took, I'll say it once again. You had an unfortunate situation with Cody Glass. You have a what if situation with Nick Suzuki. You have the best part of the 2017 draft with Eric Brandstrom. Because without him, you don't get Mark Stone. And you get the most dependable part, and that was Nick Hague. So this is Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And this was a fantastic episode. So stay tuned to all the future episodes of Vegas Hockey Hub. And until next time, continue watching hockey, support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.